I want to focus in on what happens next for a few minutes. And we're going to go into some Greek to help us understand it. I hope that's okay, because the Bible wasn't written in English. Shocking, right? We expected to. We went to France, and we were in Paris, and though we tried, and Tasha's done Duolingo, and I remember GCSE French from hundreds of years ago. We tried to speak in French. At the same time, when our French failed us, which for me was very, very quickly, we expected people to speak English. But shockingly, most of the people in Paris spoke English, but not everyone did. Shocking, I know. And saying the Bible wasn't even written in English. That's how old it is. So the New Testament was written in ancient Greek, and the Old Testament was written in an ancient form of Hebrew. They actually would have spoken another language called Aramaic, but we're not going to go into that today. So I just want to read what happened after the story when Jesus was on the shore and Peter swam towards him. Okay? This is what happened. So John 21:15-19 says this. When they'd finished eating, because they'd cooked some food and ate some fish, Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Then Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Verse 16. Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." Verse 17. The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." "Very truly I tell you," Jesus said, "when you were younger, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Now the reason I want us to unpack some Greek here is because when we read it in English, we read the word love, because in English we really have one word for the word love. Does anyone know what the word love is in English is? Anyone know? Yeah, it's the word love. It's not a trick question, it's love. We have the word love, that's what it says. So, but in Greek they had several words, 3 in particular. The first I want to talk about briefly is the word eros, which is actually where we get the word erotic from. It's about sexual love, but that's not the one we're going to talk about today. The second one is the word filio, which is a brotherly or familiar love. And the third one is the word agape, which is a perfect, unconditional, sacrificial love, even the God kind of love. So the two I want us to focus on, so forget eros, cross that one out. Let's focus on filio and agape. Everyone say filio and say agape. Okay, these are the 2 words we're going to focus on, right? And now we're going to go back through this text which we just read. So verse 15, Jesus says, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And the word love that Jesus used is the word agape, which is this sacrificial, perfect love. Then Peter replies, "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." But the word Peter uses is filio. So Jesus says, do you sacrificial love me? Do you agape love me, perfectly love me? And Peter says, yes, you know that I brotherly love you. I love you like a brother. I love you like you're in my family. Verse 16, again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Agape, sacrificial, perfect love. And Peter answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." But he used the word filio again, this brotherly love. Then verse 17, it says, a third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" But this time Jesus doesn't say agape. He says filio. So he doesn't say, "Do you sacrificially love me? Do you love me in a perfect way?" He says, "Do you love me like a brother? Do you love me like I'm your family?" And Peter replies, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. I filio you." That's interesting, right? Because it looks like Jesus lowered the bar. He's like, "Do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally? Do you love me sacrificially?" That's what he said. And Peter's like, yeah, I love you like a brother. Like, it's a bit of a put down, really, isn't it? It's like, will you give everything for me? And it's like, I'll give you some things. I love you like a bro. And then Jesus asks him again, do you sacrificially love me? He's like, well, I still love you like a brother. And then he says, Peter, do you love me like a brother? It's like, yeah, that's how I love you. I love you like a brother. I do love you, but I don't agape love you. Why does he have that in there? It's kind of a strange thing. Why? I think we totally miss it when we only read the English, because it's the word love several times and we just think love and it means one thing, but there are clear differences in Greek. And why did Jesus ask him in different ways? Why is it recorded in the Bible in different ways? Why is it agape and phileo? And then why does Jesus go from do you agape me to phileo me? That's an interesting question to ask. And so I asked that question, and I read some sources and read some commentaries on this. And there were some commentaries which said, oh, there's no reason. It doesn't matter. It's just a synonym. Like, they both mean love, so don't read too much into it. But then I think when you read the next two verses, we see why. Okay, because the next two verses, I read them already, I'll read them again. Verses 18 and 19. This is Jesus talking to Peter. He says, very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. As in, you did what you wanted. You followed your own hopes. You followed your own dreams. You had your own aspirations. The clothes you put on, you presented yourself to the world in a certain way. You put yourself away across the way you wanted to be put across. You were seen the way you wanted to be seen. You did the things that you wanted to do. You were following you and your own objectives and aspirations was your primary purpose in life, following yourself when you were younger. And then it goes on to say, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. Stretching out your hands is like the international sign of surrender, right? Or it's what we do when we worship. So many of us, if you're new here today, you may have seen people as we were singing worship songs, stretching out our hands. And again, it's a sign of surrender, but it's a sign of worship to God. So he says, when you're older, you will worship me. You'll stretch out your hands. You'll surrender to me. But then it says, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would, this is key, glorify God. And then he said to him, follow me. And so he finished with a new invitation. He began by inviting him to follow him. He finished by giving him another invitation to follow him. Now, why is this key? Well, there are several sources as early as AD 180 that cite that Peter was crucified for his faith like Jesus was. Many of them state that he was actually crucified upside down. Because he didn't feel worthy to be crucified in the same manner as Jesus. But he went to the cross because of his faith in Jesus. That's why it says that his death would glorify God. Now, when someone lays down their life and sacrifices themselves the way that he did and glorified God through his sacrifice, that's an act of love. In fact, earlier in John, it says, in John 15, verse 30, it says, there is no greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. What word in Greek do you think the word love is in this case? It's agape. Because Peter sacrificed himself. Peter went to the cross. He allowed himself to be sacrificed to glorify God.